Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture. And before I go any further, there's a bunch of links up above to support me and my guest, Dan Wickline. So please go click those links because they actually mean something, and it's super important to go do that. So welcome to the show because I am very excited.
It's good to be here, Andrew. Nice to meet you. And it's kind of interesting being on the other side. I've spent so much time interviewing people now. It's been a while since I got interviewed. So
Well, I am sure that I am going to live up to hopefully your standard. And, because I know exactly what it's like to be on the other side and be on this side and everything in between. And obviously, you've been writing comics and been writing for over 20 years at this point. And so I am super curious. I think it's the best place to start is how did you even get into writing, getting into writing comics? And how did all of this come about? Because obviously you work for one of my favorite companies, Zenescope, which we're going to get to, I promise.
uh, I I'll give you the Reader's Digest version because started off got my first comic when I was 5 from my uncle. Started reading. My mom was a manager at a Kmart store. One of her employees was a comic fan, and they used to fight over when the Star Wars toys came in. She'd get the figures for me, and he'd get the figures for himself. He ended up becoming my comic connection. He used to go to the comic shop and pick up my books for me and bring them over. And one day he goes, "Hey, there's this convention down in LA." This was probably 1981, 80 or 81. I think it was 81. He said, "Do you want to go?" And I'm like, "Well, hell yeah." I was a kid. So yes. And we went down there. It was at the Biltmore Hotel. And I got in. It was in the basement of the Biltmore Hotel. And I got to meet Walter Koenig, which was, I suddenly had a love for Star Trek. I got to meet Carolyn Monroe, who was doing Moonraker at the time. So I suddenly had a love for both James Bond and women. And then, and I got to meet this guy named Jack Kirby. And I went up, and Jack was so nice. I took a Captain America issue up to him, and he asked my name. We talked for a couple minutes. He signed the inside, underneath the indices on the book, which is what Jack always did. But he signed it to Daniel from Jack Kirby. And I was so taken by that I'm like, I need more. It was like crack all of a sudden. I wanted to get more comics signed by this guy. So I ran out and I ran to the whole convention center, and I found all 15 issues of the Black Panther that had come out a couple years, or a little bit before that. And I ran back to his table, and he was gone. I'm like, oh, this is killing me. Well, my buddy, this guy Gil, who introduced me to, got me into the place, said, "He's going upstairs. He's leaving. Go get him." I'm 11 years old. I have no fear. I race up the escalator after him. I catch him in the lobby. And sure enough, Jack is an absolute sweetheart. He stands there. He had just run into like an old friend, and they were talking. And he stood there with this old friend. I would take the comic out of the bag, hand it to him. He would sign the inside, hand it to his friend, and and she would put it back in the bag. We had this little conveyor belt to do 15 comics. And I walked out of that convention thinking, A, these are the greatest people ever. I love this industry, and I want to work in it. And a couple years later, I realized I was not a good enough artist to ever work in comics. I'm better than stick figure theater. I've actually did the artwork designs for some of the Sinbad villains and the cover layout. So I'm a little better than that, but not by much. And I decided to be a writer from that point on, and stuck with it for a while. Ended up publishing my first book in 1996 under my own publishing line called Hardline Studios. Did that for about 5 years, maybe put out 4 or 5 books total. And then in 2001, I went freelance.
And obviously, there's so much to talk about with that. But I think what people want to know, first and foremost, is that obviously you've done a lot of independent stuff and publishing that, and indie is right now really hot. And it's also made a complete comeback where, the 90s were very interesting and a lot of good stuff. So what was that like, really publishing stuff in 1996 all the way up to like 2001? Because obviously that was like when comics also were sort of exploding and dying at the exact same time because of the image boom.
Yeah, yeah. See, I got in right as the dying started, you know, which was the big issue is that in the big move when I first started looking into doing comics in '94. There was a bunch of different distributors. There was Friendly Franks. There was one in Hawaii. There was Capital. And while I was putting this book together and putting Hardline Studios together, everything changed and Diamond became the one and only. And that was at the same time, there was this thing called Pogs. And I don't know if you remember Pogs. They were these little cardboard things with art on them, and they helped kill the boom of the 90s.
I'm not that old. I'm 28. Yeah. I'm not that old. So clearly, I'm significantly younger than so many people. But
yeah. So anyway, so back in my day, there was these things called Pogs, and what would happen is you'd hit them. So Pogs suddenly took off for like 6 months to a year. They were insanely popular, and all the stores got into them because that's what the kids were coming and looking for. The problem was that they quickly died because kids went, this is a dumb game. And they got rid of all their little cardboard pieces and started playing video games. And they never went back. For this big chunk of the fan base never went back to comics. So right around 96 is when, 94 to 96 is when Pogs kind of took over the world. So coming out of it and trying to put a book out in 96 was the worst time possible. But it allowed me to start going to conventions, start networking, meeting all these people. One of my favorite conventions from that era was 1999. We have a booth at the San Diego Comic-Con. Across from me is Hurricane Comics, who signed their deal with Image that weekend, which is Violent Messiahs and Chassis, and it was Josh Dysart, who's gone on to write all this stuff. It was Tone Rodriguez, who became one of my best friends. So they were directly across from us. Next to them was Dean Zachary and Don McGregor, who, of course, Don McGregor is kind of the father of the Black Panther. A lot of the stuff that the Black Panther movies are coming out of are pulling from Don McGregor's work. But at the end cap, next to us was Cross-Gen Comics, debuting for the first time. So there was a lot of excitement. The booth was, really popping. And that's when we had the books like Bloodlust and Force out. That was probably our heyday. And again, we just still couldn't do enough as an indie publisher at that point to really get a toehold. So I had to kind of pull the plug on things shortly after. And like I said, go freelance in 2001. So it was coming off of this big boom into this bust era. So it really was the worst time to try to start a publishing company.
And then to even go further and jump a little bit outside of 2001, obviously companies sort of survived and retooled. And one of your big things that sort of got you out a little bit later, past 2001, was with IDW. And I was working on the 30 Days a Night series. Yeah. And obviously, Steve Niles was involved. And there's all sorts of stuff where it was supposed to be pitched as a movie, and then it became a comic, and then the movie sort of was getting pitched around, and there's like sequels. And obviously people love 30 Days.
Yeah, what happened with 30 Days was it was absolutely insane. I met Steve because I had started a website at the time called Comic World News. I was going to be a news site. And I interviewed him for his book Fused, which came out about 4 months before everything started with 30 Days a Night. And he thought that was going to be his big book. This other one he was doing with Ben Templesmith, this was a throwaway. IDW was a brand new company. There were a bunch of guys that came out of Wildstorm. They started their own publishing. They got Ashley Wood to do some books. They turned to Steve and said, hey, do you want to do something? And he came up with this idea. Well, they also were shopping things around, and the concept, Ben had done some artwork for it. the concept caught fire, and there was a bidding war, and that it got bidded up. It bidded up to $1 million, and it just really put Steve on the map. So here he was coming into the year thinking Fused was going to be his big book, and 30 Days a Night just completely overshadowed it. And being friends with Steve, he had a website at the time that had a message board. And so many people came out of this message board. Chris Ryle, who ended up being the editor-in-chief at IDW for a long time.
He's been on this show or another show that's similar, and I got to interview him, so he's great.
Yeah.
Great.
Liam Sharp was on there. Like I said, Ben Templesmith, Simon Kudransky, who was doing Spawn for a while, Dan Taylor, who went on to be one of the editors at IDW for a long time. All of these people came out of this, and Steve was kind of pointing people in directions. So he and I started doing stuff together, and 30 Days a Night happened because he was in a weird period with them where he was thinking about taking a vampire book elsewhere. And we were talking this shows you how long ago, in AOL Instant Messenger. And he asked me, hey, what organs do you think a vampire doesn't need? Like, what do you mean? He goes, well, I want to do an autopsy where they're pulling things out of a vampire and then he wakes up. So I'm nailing different things. And I said, they wouldn't need lungs because they can survive underground and buried and stuff. So maybe they don't breathe. He goes, yeah, that makes sense. And I made a joke. I said, they'd make great astronauts if they didn't need to breathe. And we started this thing back and forth about, oh, yeah, that would be awesome. And I was joking. We spent about a half hour joking. And then he pops up. He goes, I just talked to Milks, this artist over in Indonesia. He said, he's going to draw it for us. And I said, draw what? He said, this vampire in space book. Like, excuse me? Next thing I know, and I'm going to give you the big secret here. Steve wanted, and Steve might kill me for telling you this, Steve wanted to call the original series Suckernaut. And I said, no, we can't do that. He goes, fine, come up with a better name. I went, we can't. And then it ended up becoming part of 30 Days a Night. But it was still Suckernaut for a long time. And I remember laying in bed one night, and we were at the point where we needed the permanent name. And I was just scratching my head, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And my wife rolled over and goes, are you still thinking about that stupid title? I said, yeah. She goes, just call it Dead Space and go to sleep. So the next day I went, Dead Space. And Steve's like, that's it. We're good.
And obviously, 30 Days a Night, Dead Space, and then the sequels to it. People love this shit, for lack of a better word. And this has a cult following. It's almost a cult classic type thing. But it's even more than that. It's almost mainstream as well. And so what is this like getting to work on it, on the book, all that stuff? Because it really was a cool thing that IDW did. And then the movie comes out, and then all that stuff's happening. And now it's like, get this really big franchise happening.
Yeah, it was a very unique experience because just even tangentially involved with it. I went to Wizard World Dallas and set up for the show, and I do photography as well. So I had a shoot I was doing with a model while I was there. So Friday night I get in, I set up my table, I do my book sales. Saturday morning I get up.
Still listening. I want to make sure everybody knows. I'm legitimately turning on a light. So we don't have 30 Days a Night.
Yeah. I go over to the convention for an hour or two in the morning, put the books out. I come back. I go and do my shoot. I come back from the shoot. And within an hour of being back from the shoot, I had sold out of everything I had brought to the convention. All my 30 Days a Night books. I had... I had some other stuff. I had some humanoids books. I had done Metal Hurlant. I think I had started on Zenescope. So everything I had, I'd even done this charity book called The Unusual Suspects that came out through Top Cow. everything was gone. I've got a day and a half left at a convention and nothing for my table. There's a photo of me sitting there with, I'd written kissing booth, and I had put out prices for kissing because I had nothing left until Top Cow was nice enough to give me some more of the Unusual Suspect to sell. But other than, I mean, it was just a wild weekend. And it was because of 30 Days a Night that people were just looking for any ties into that.
But that's a good problem to have.
Oh my God, yeah, yeah. I mean, to sit there a Saturday night going, I don't even need to go to the show tomorrow, you know.
And obviously, it's very cool, and we're still talking about it. And this is one of the best horror films and one of the best horror comics out there, and people love it. And the fact that I think it came out 2006, 2007, and we're talking about it, 14, 15 years later, is very much a tribute to it. And what is that like for you, knowing that it's never going to die?
It is amazing to me because, well, I look at the film itself, and it's not like any other vampire film I've ever seen before. You could easily take the vampires out and replace it with soldiers. It could just be an occupying force movie, and it would still work. But the part that amazes me is that it almost became like vampires got divided. You had these horrible creature vampires that Steve was leading, and then you had the Twilight shimmering vampires, and it became like this division of, no, vampires aren't supposed to glisten, and it was great. And I've had a lot of fun about that. I even got to do the source book for 30 Days a Night a couple of years later, and brought in my wife at the time to co-write that with me as kind of a thank you for coming up with the Dead Space name.
And I love it, and I love everything about it, and I love the movie, I love the comics, and obviously, as I stated, we're still talking about it. And then even going further, you also got to work on Strange Case with as well. And so what was that like, continuing to work with him? Because obviously that's a cool, crazy book. And
I absolutely love working with Steve because it's kind of a weird thing in that our writing styles are very different. Steve is your classic horror writer, and I've always considered myself a mystery writer. So there's always going to be a mystery at the heart of what I'm writing. So where Dead Space is more straightforward horror, Spreading the Disease is more of a mystery. There's more, I mean, there's still a lot of horror in it, but that was more of the style that I write, more detailed oriented mystery. When we came to Strange Cases, he was actually working on it for a video game that didn't happen. And the first thing he asked me to do was, well, could I help him do a level? So I wrote a level for the video game, and that kind of got me in with the company that was doing it. And then they're like, well, we're going to do these comics. Steve's real busy, so why don't you work with the concept and then you do the scripts? And we decided we were going to follow. Fell had come out recently, the Warren Ellis, Ben Templesmith series, and how they were doing the shorter books, but and the little cheaper price. So we followed that format, and we got David Hartman to do the artwork. And David was probably best known at the time for doing the Rob Zombie animated videos. So working with David is just an absolute blast, because all I would do is I would text him and I'd be like, all right, Dave, we're going to do issue 3. What kind of monsters do you want? Hey, can we do Yetis? Yeah, we can do Yetis. Okay, I'm on it. It's a snow episode, And that's pretty much how we handled it. Was I would find out from Dave the type of things he'd want. And what we're doing with Strange Cases, we were taking the archetypes of classic monster hunters. We had the Kolchak type. We had the Sam, kind of the Cal McDonald type, to use Steve's character. We had the Buffy and we had the Ash, those type of things. And we were putting them into the kind of a house on Haunted Hill type setting, and just kind of grow from there. And it was probably one of the most ridiculously fun series to do. And the company that was putting it all together, which I don't believe even exists anymore, they got us together to do like an outtakes video, and you can find it online somewhere. And it's Steve, myself, and David Hartman, and we're sitting in Dark Delicacies, this amazing horror bookstore in Burbank, and they're asking us questions, and we're really just spending the entire time ripping on each other and making jokes. So if you want something fun to watch, go check out that, and you'll see a much younger version of all three of us.
And I want to table this because I do want to talk about Zenescope, and I love Zenescope. It's no secret that, and I've said it when I interviewed Ralph, and Ralph's coming back on in either next week or the week after that, that I make a lot of money by selling Zenescope's books, and they give me beer money essentially when I was in college. And that's all I'm going to say before I incriminate myself any further. But obviously you came into Zenescope, I think around 2008. And Zenescope was like 3 years old at this point. Wonderland was starting to come out, and Zenescope was gaining a lot of traction. So how did that come about? Because there's some really funny pictures that they just showed a little while ago, all of you guys at San Diego, significantly like 15 years ago.
Yeah. Actually, I've got a video I just came across in my files from our 10th anniversary party that was held at San Diego. So it was kind of a backdoor way in that there was an artist that I had done some work with over at Avatar named Sean Shaw. He came to me and said, "Hey, this company I'm talking to, they're looking to do a Sinbad book, and they're talking to me about drawing it, but they don't have a writer for it yet. Maybe we could pitch together." I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I worked up, and I was still relatively new, so I literally came up with a 24-issue pitch, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to nail this. This is going to be my X-Men. I'm going to take Sinbad. And the only direction I had was, we want Sinbad to be a cross between James Bond and Captain Jack Sparrow. And I'm thinking, first thing, I don't know how you mix the two of them, but we'll give it a shot. So I put this pitch together and sent it in. And then the next thing I hear, Sean is off. He's not doing the book anymore. And I don't even know what happened to the guy. I haven't seen him in years. But Ralph and Joe reached out to me, and they're like, "Yeah, we like what you got going here. So let's keep this going." And we went through a lot of different artists on the book. Gus Vasquez ended up doing the original character designs. Paulo Pantaleon came in to do the issues 1, 2, and then we just started going like crazy through different artists. Ron Adrian, Tone Rodriguez came on to do a book for us. But it was a lot of fun. And then at one point, they said, "Hey, do you want to do a Grimm Fairy Tale book?" I'm like, well, sure, yeah. And I'm looking at the Grimm Fairy Tales, and there's all with these gorgeous girls on the cover and these great stories. And I went, "Yeah, which story do I get to do?" They went, "Three Blind Mice." But David Nakayama did an amazing cover on that book. That was my first Grimm book. And I got to do a true horror take on Three Blind Mice. And I literally had people come up to me at shows going, "What is wrong with you?" So, yeah. So I started with Sinbad, and I think we ended up doing, I want to say 13 episodes. We did 12. Joe ended up writing one of them. We did a swap. He did one episode of Sinbad. I did an episode of Grimm where we actually did the origin of one of the Sinbad characters. And so that swap. And then we had a 13th episode. We had Brent Peoples as the artist at the time. And I don't think we actually got that book printed out, published. That would have been a solo story of one of the characters, and it would have tied into Alibaba. So I had huge plans for the series, but with Sinbad, the covers help sell them. And when you're doing a book about a male sea captain and stuff,
for Zenescope, nonetheless.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're doing it for the Navy Institute, it's a little bit different.
What's funny is I still get people coming up and asking me about Sinbad. and people love it. And I know internally, Dave Franchini still talks about how Sinbad was the book that got him. He went out to the Zenescope website looking to buy the next issue of Sinbad, clicked the wrong button, saw that they had jobs, and applied for an internship. You know,
yeah, for college credit, might I add.
Yes,
Dave's been on, and then he tells the story about how he was going for IT of all things. So Dave Franchini, who is now writing Bell and a bunch of things for Zenescope, basically came in the Paul Levitz way. How Paul Levitz came into DC Comics.
Yeah, but yeah. So he said that that Sinbad was the reason he did that. But of course, I got to expand out. They started throwing. I'm a very fast writer, so a lot of times it would be, oh no, we need a script tomorrow. Let's call Dan. You know, so it's like, you know, so Grim Fairy Tales. Talking with Raven, we came up with the ideas to do Call of Wonderland and
oh man, there's so much to talk about. You got to break all of this down. You're going way too quick. You're like writing the podcast for me right now. It's terrible.
All right, where do you want to go next?
So obviously one of the things that I like about Sinbad is that this was sort of one of the first expansions of the Grimm universe. And then obviously you wrote a bunch of Grimm fairy tales where Three Snake Leaves, Puss in Boots, Dorian Gray, Diamonds and Toad, The Waking, I think, you know, a bunch of Dream Eater sagas, some stuff you were involved in, Song of the Sword and Is It Safe, which sort of led into Age of Darkness. And so what was that even like to work on, you know, just the main series, Volume 1 of Grimm Fairy Tales, because a lot of those are sort of one-shots, but they're also connected and they're lesson-oriented, and you could jump in a bunch of the first volumes without having to have too much background.
I think that was a real neat thing about the original Grimm run, is that it was very focused on telling the stories, and Sela was more of a connector, just to bring it together. She was more of the crypt keeper, that type of thing. And that was a lot of fun. And I remember, it's like, I remember when we did the swap and I did the Three Snake Leaves, most people don't even know the Three Snake Leaves is an actual Grimm fairy tale. I went out and found that one, and it worked well for the character of Wilhelm's origin story. But, you know, by the time I got in and doing some of them, we had actually branched out into do stuff like Puss in Boots and Dorian Gray. I don't think are Grimm fairy tale. I know Dorian Gray isn't. But to connect those two together and stuff like that, it was a lot of fun because we had a lot of freedom. You know, when it got to the point where they were doing more of a shared universe, then it became like working for Marvel or DC, where you really kind of need to know what happened before, what's happening next. In the early days, it was pretty much just scare the hell out of us with the story and see what happened, you know, and then talk with the editor to see how to make it connect.
And then obviously even jumping into Wonderland, because Wonderland was brilliant, the first trilogy. I have an omnibus of it. Obviously, I'm leaving my omnibus alone. I'm reading it on Comixology. It's so much easier to read all this stuff on Comixology just on my nice iPad. If there's ever a sponsor for my show, you know, that would be the perfect one right there, Comixology. Oh my God. Just send me a referral link and I'll be totally happy, Amazon. And I'll use it to buy Amazon stock, which will make me even richer, but that's not the point. But anyhow, what was this like launching the new Wonderland trilogy and sort of the tie-in? Because we got Call of Wonderland, which then led into, you know, Madness of Wonderland and all that stuff that was going on. And then that led into the new ongoing Wonderland. And people love Wonderland.
Yeah.
And Wonderland put Zenescope on the map. The first one did, and then people want to keep going back to it. And it's arguably one of Zenescope's best things they've ever published.
When I first read the Wonderland books, I kind of in my mind thought, this is the one universe I won't be playing in because it is really out there. Raven was doing such an amazing story, and just there's a brilliance to what he was doing. That and
it goes deep. Cal and Alice have the same letters, and it's the exact same vowels and letters in their name, just structured differently. It's brilliantly sick what he did, and it's great. And I say that as a huge fan of Raven Gregory. It is brilliantly sick what he did with Wonderland.
Oh yeah. And so I've kind of figured I'll stay over here with the Sinbad stuff. I'll do some Grim Fairy. That was my niche. I was good with that. And then he got a hold of me and he said, "Hey, we want to do an annual, and we want to play around. I really want someone to do something about what happened to the house afterwards." And I'm like, "Well, wait a minute, a horror story about a house. Now that's something I could do." So that was kind of how I got my feet wet into Wonderland, was this outside story where it's like, okay, so, and I kind of borrowed the old John Travolta movie, Boy in the Bubble. And I thought, what if this kid was trapped within a haunted house? How sick could that be? And just kind of expanded out of that. I know a friend of mine still to this day hates me for that story, because at one point there's this girl is in the basement and a bookcase falls on top of her. At the same time, the hot water heaters exploded, so the water's rising. Her spine is snapped and she's crushed, trapped under this bookcase, and you know she's about to drown. And now my friend cannot walk through her house near a bookcase without putting a hand on it to make sure it doesn't fall on her. She's like, "You created a phobia." Like being crushed by a bookcase.
And then even going further into that, then, Call Wonderland comes out, and obviously, it's a whole bunch of new people sort of getting tied into Wonderland, facing the Red Knight who wants to destroy Wonderland. And these people are doing some stuff and going up against the Red Knight. And then that leads into, Madness of Wonderland, the sequel. And so obviously now we're back into Wonderland, and you're adding into it, and you're tying into the ongoing series and expanding the universe, much like Sinbad expanded the universe. This is another expansion in a lot of ways. Yeah. And it's sort of a pathway in.
Well, the Red Knight was actually a spin-off, came out of that horror story, that house story. The little boy from that ends up becoming the Red Knight. But how I found my connection to that was, oddly enough, again, through my wife at the time. She was a big Lovecraft fan, and somehow I think she mentioned that Lovecraft was either a contemporary of who wrote Wonderland? Lewis Carroll. They were either friends, or at least they were around at the same time. And as soon as I hit the idea that the two of them would be even exist at the same time, it started clicking in my head. And then I ended up on the phone one night with Raven, and we just started shooting ideas back and forth. And he told me that Charles Dodson, who is Lewis Carroll's real name, he reminded me that he was in Wonderland. I went, oh my God, what if he was working against Lovecraft, and what if Lovecraft was actually trying to strengthen the border between Wonderland and the real world? And I pitched this idea to him. I said, what if the reason Lovecraft, if you've ever read H.P. Lovecraft, it's very thick writing, very wordy, he'll say in 20 words what you could say in 2.
He's pulling a Harley Ellis.
Harlan Ellison. Yeah, it's very thick. And I thought, well, what if he's using all these descriptor words to build up the barrier between Wonderland and the real world? But now, when we're in this modern days that we're using, hashtags and abbreviations and shortening everything, and we're communicating through text messages and stuff, what if those walls are starting to break? And I said, so I want to tell this parallel story between modern day when the walls are falling and the past where Lovecraft and Dodgson are fighting each other. And he loved that idea, and it led to Call of Wonderland and Madness of Wonderland, which were, like I said, trying to bring the Lovecraft feel into what he was doing with the Wonderland series at Zenescope.
And what I love about these, 8 issues is that the covers on them are really well done. And that's the other thing that is also very helpful about these books, is that the covers are fantastic. I know Mike Crone did a bunch of them. It's a lot of fun stuff. Obviously, I've spoken with Michael D. Pascal. I've spoken with Sanju, who's worked on a bunch of them. I'm trying to get Mike Chrome on because he's done a bunch of them. And I would kill to do Neon because Neon's done some work on this as well. And so that is something that's also very cool. And so, and this is not the only thing. Zenescope always has had great covers for just their regular books, then they've had exclusives. And so what does that feel like for you as a writer? Because it's very cool when a company actually puts really good art on a bunch of things.
I'll be honest that there are times, I mean, still to this day, every once in a while, I'll look online and I'll see a book and I'll see my name attached to it. It's like, I've never seen that cover. It's gorgeous. But they did so many amazing covers and a lot of exclusives and stuff that I never even got to see. But, you know, Nei did, I'm jumping ahead, but I got to do Tales of Neverland. And
we're going to the darkness, guys. We're going to the darkness.
She did this connecting cover, which is this woman sitting by the water. And then there's another one that she connects it vertically. And it's this scene underwater underneath it. And I didn't even realize they were connecting covers till one day I'm at a convention and I've got them laid out. And I went, hang on a second. Oh, my God. You know?
So it's like the Elias Chazoudis, you know, Valentine's and St. Patrick's Day covers, where they're vertically connecting and not horizontally connecting. And it's super, super cool. And I love the fact that Zenescope, because they have vertical connecting covers.
Yes.
But I've never seen, you know, horizontal, I should say. I've never seen vertical until Zenescope.
Yeah. I think the biggest surprise to me was twofold. When I go out to a convention, a large number of the people coming to my table looking for the Zenescope book were women, which you stand back and you look at these covers and you're like, oh, yeah, we see what audience they're playing to. No. I'd say the majority of the audience for those books are actually females. And it makes sense because all the characters are these really empowered women. Joe and Ralph were very determined to keep the books. I mean, Joe's got a daughter, and he always wanted these books to be things that his daughters could read. But these covers always make these women look amazing. But they're all very, like I said, empowered. And again, women were the ones coming. And they would come up, and they would like, oh, do you have this book? Yes. Well, and they'd pull each cover out that I'd have and would buy like multiple copies because they wanted all the covers. So that was a surprise to me because I hadn't worked on anything before Zenescope where the cover collection was as big as the story collection.
So for me, and I'm very honest, I am a cover glutton. So I love Zenescope more for the covers. And I just recently started actually reading a lot of Zenescope because I just got a comicsology subscription. And I'm going back with all this stuff, and I'm like, oh man, this is actually really great because I just love the cover art. And I love what Ali Garza does. I love what Keith Garvey does. I love Sun Kumanaki, Ebas. I mean, there's all these people that have actually come out of Zenescope cover-wise that have worked for Marvel, DC. David Nakayama is a really good example where he is hard to pin down in the Zenescope. He has graduated from Zenescope and has now basically worked for Marvel and does a lot of exclusives. And every once in a while, he jumps into DC, but he is not as easily accessible. And there's a bunch of people that Zenescope, like Keith Garvey's a great example of that, where Keith Garvey's career has been launched pretty much because of Zenescope. Late, might I add, because Keith Garvey's obviously a little bit older than the new kids on the block. But it's kind of a crazy circumstance, and I love it. And I love putting this stuff up on Instagram. My mom doesn't, but that's okay. She's not me. So
I look at the solicitations and I see names popping up like crazy that, oh, this guy's on a Marvel book and this guy's over here doing a Dynamite book. And it's like, oh, yeah, I worked with them back at Zenescope. You know, a bunch of these guys, some of their first books were over at Zenescope. And, you know, so I get to talk to them.
And even on the writing side, you have people like Howard Mackey and Chuck Dixon, who are two major comic book veterans who basically, I mean, Ghost Rider and Batman Nightfall have worked, and every once in a while come back into Zenescope, and it's kind of crazy when you think about it, where it's a very cool company, And obviously you're in the mixture as well because you've done a bunch of stuff and you really helped to shape this with Neverland, and then obviously Neverland Age of Darkness, which is dealing with Nathan Cross and is pretty much flipping Peter Pan upside its head. And that's the other thing about Zenescope too, is they take a bunch of these fairy tales and flip them upside down and shake up the bottle a little bit.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it seems like such a simple concept when they started. We're just going to do dark versions of Grimm fairy tales. Oh, we're going to do a dark version of Alice in Wonderland. But what they've done is just taken that ball and run with it and created some pretty amazing comics. And I don't think they get their due. I don't think Joe and Ralph really get their due for what they've done and how this company has grown.
I mean, they've sold over 15 million books. And this is something that I get in discussions with people all the time, where people view Zenescope and like, oh, it's cheesecake good girl art. And I'm like, have you opened up a Zenescope book? And I'm the first person to say not every Zenescope book and not every series is for everybody. You could not be a fan of Sinbad or Neverland, but you could love Robin Hood or Van Helsing. Or it could be vice versa, or you can not like The Courier. And I'm probably shooting my relationships with half of the people at Zenescope right now. But the idea is that if you read and take a sampler of Zenescope, there is books for everybody in that. Now, you might not particularly love Wonderland because you might just not want the darkness and you want more of a heroic feel to it, which is Robin Hood. Or you might want, Van Helsing, which is different than Robin Hood, which is still the action, but it's a little bit darker, but not as dark as Wonderland, and not as fuckery as Wonderland. Is I think a fair statement. Is that's what Wonderland is. Or if you just want, volume 2 of Grimm Fairy Tales, that is a little bit more concise than volume 1, or just going through the Age of Darkness saga. It's very interesting. So obviously, you've had a lot of playing in Zenescope and shaping this, because you've done an Age of Darkness story. You've done, I guess, Neverland Volume 4, I think it is, in that Age of Darkness. You've done some work on Oz and telling some stories. I forget which story. I think you did the Toto Dog Part 1 story.
The Tin Man. I did the Tin Man.
Oh, the Tin Man. I'm really bad at this. Clearly.
That's fine. Hey, I forget sometimes. I forgot about the Age of Darkness Neverland thing until you just mentioned it. And that was a blast of a series to write, because Cross is such a fun character. He's a little bit John McClane from Die Hard, and you have to remember, oh yeah, this is basically Captain Hook, but we're making him the hero.
I love Neverland, and I love parts of Neverland, and I love the concept of it. And I'm in the middle of Neverland, so I don't know exactly where it's going. I get to read a graphic novel a week, and I love it, and I just love the fact that like Tinkerbell is like the bad guy and Peter Pan is whatever, and that Wendy and then Hook up, no pun intended, and like Tiger Lily, it sort of becomes the new queen of the island. Oh, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant, and it just reimagines what it could be. And this is just the fight for it while everything else is going on in Age of Darkness. And that's what I like about this as well, is that Volume 4, from what I know, it's a sort of a self-contained story. And I'm going to use an analogy. I don't know if you're a Gundam fan by any chance.
A little bit, yeah.
So Gundam does stuff where they have War and Pocket, and they have the OFMS team, and they have Thunderbolts, which all take place during the 1 Year War. That's what this story is, where it takes place during Age of Darkness, but it doesn't interfere too much in Age of Darkness, the main saga, but it gives you more context, and also is a more ground-to-earth type story, and it's also putting a microscope on what's going on.
Yeah. The reason they could do stuff like that is, in a lot of ways, Ralph and Joe work as kind of the Kevin Feige of the Zenescope universe. They kind of plot everything out and give the structure to the stories and where everything fits in. And then they let the writers come in, like, somebody comes in to write different books. Well, that's what happens here, is you get different writers coming in to put their stamp on it. But Joe and Ralph are still guiding everything. And other authors come in as well. Raven was part of the decision, kind of the guiding force for a while. Pat Chan took that on for a while. Dave Franchini is kind of that guy now.
And then Dave, I think Wolf is now involved.
Yeah, he's coming in now because I know Ralph is trying to focus more on the TV and film side, and so they need to shift around a little bit. So it should be interesting to see where that goes.
No. Ralph really wants to go back to his bartending career, but that's a different discussion. I don't know if you know the joke of that.
Yeah.
He was the bartender in Robin Hood, I Love New York.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah. So there's a lot of it's a very controlled overall universe, and that's why I think it works, where they can bring in a lot of different people to write the stories because they're kind of giving the important components. They'll call me up and say, "We need this story, and we need these type of things to happen. Can you have it tomorrow?" Yeah.
And what's also nice about this is that there's a lot of realms. So I think there's 5 realms in the Grimm universe. And so you can play in all 5 of those realms, and that you could have stories that are just a one-shot, or you could have a one-shot that leads into a 6-issue arc that then leads into another arc. And it's very cool. And also you could distance things out from each other. Something like Sleepy Hollow doesn't have to be perfectly connected in there. I know you worked on Sleepy Hollow. Obviously, some of those Oz stories, which were not part of the main, but it was Tales from Oz. And it's just giving more context to what that Oz stuff is, and then how that Oz stuff connects back into the Grimm universe. And, obviously, I don't think Dorothy, from my understanding of Oz, has really appeared much like Robin Hood and Van Helsing have had crossovers the same way, but I definitely think that there's something that can be done in the future with that. But it's the idea that this gives us more context now, which is very nice as well. And that's what I like about this, because I just read Tales of Oz. Because I read the first Oz story, and then I read Tales of Oz right after it. And sometimes the chronologically, a Zenescope gets all wonky. You can get lost in the weeds very easily.
Well, they've actually done something to try to fix that, in that what they're doing now is they're doing a lot of one-shots and miniseries and trying to make it more accessible to new readers, but still have a somewhat overarching story that people can come into and get hooked. But they are trying to approach that.
Well, they just need to build a timeline. Legitimately, it could take them like 3 days. If they just build the timeline, it would solve every problem.
Yeah, but then something comes out and it contradicts the timeline, and you have to start over.
Well, all I want is just like an entry point, an easy entry point on their website. That's all I want. That's all I want, because this way I know that I could enter here and then have like legitimately 100 issues to go through and then enjoy myself. Because I'm now becoming a reader of all this stuff, and I know with certain things to start. And Wonderland's obviously a lot easier, but then when you get into Robin Hood, Van Helsing, and even Oz, it gets a little crazy, because there's Tales of Oz, there's one-shots of Oz, there's Oz volume 1, 2, and 3, and then where does Tales fit in versus this, and then how you do it. So all they have to do is just build me a timeline, and I will be ecstatic. I'll be a happy camper. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. I hope they make one for you, because I think a lot of people would like one of those.
So I'll do it if they just give me all the stuff. I'll go through it. I'll do it for free. I mean, seriously, just give me like a week, and I'll do it for free. If you give me everything, I'll read it. Oh, it'll be great. But I digress right there. And obviously, Zenescope is a very cool company, and I love Zenescope in so many ways. I love the artists they pull in. I love the writers they pull in. I like what you've done, because obviously I've read Sinbad, I've read the Tin Man story, and I'm sure I've read other things from you that I didn't even know that I read. So because you have your hand in everything. So what is this like for you? Because you've played a very instrumental role in adding and shaping some of this stuff in the Zenescope world, whether it's front and center or it's off to the side, because it's important to know that Sinbad is in this world, and that even though he hasn't had a story for a little bit of time, that story is giving more context that he's in play. And same thing with like the Oz stuff, and same thing with all that Fall of Wonderland stuff.
Sinbad was some of the most fun writing I've ever gotten to do. I remember getting to a certain point in one of the books and thinking, okay, this is where I make the character mine, or not. And I did kind of an over-the-top scene. And the note I got back from Joe was, more like this, please. And as soon as I saw that, I went, all right, this is mine. I'm good. Sinbad's my baby when it comes to Zenescope, but I have really enjoyed playing in all the different series, all the different franchises. And I've basically, Dave knows, Ralph knows that they call me up, I'm in. If they've got a book they need written, because I just love playing in this universe. I love jumping in, and it does. I feel very connected to it, having jumped around from Wonderland to, Neverland to Oz, to really getting to play in all the different fields, and then also doing something like Sleepy Hollow or the Tales of the Tales of Terror. Got to do a couple of those books. So, I mean, their bottom line is that they just need, if they need something, I'm there. And it's probably always going to be that way. If I can fit it in my schedule, I'll be happy to write it, because it is just such a fun universe to play in.
And also, it's not superheroes. And I hate to say this. I mean, look, I love Superman. I love what Marvel does sometimes with certain characters, even DC. I'm a big Green Lantern fan. But after a while, and the reason why I like Zenescope is that it's not superheroes. And these people and these characters are human in a lot of ways. And that's the other thing, is that I'm sick of superheroes. And I'm sick of, you kill Batman, he's coming back in 2 issues. Like, people who die in Zenescope don't come back, or they come back in a very interesting way, but not your typical
dark way. Yeah, it's usually a very dark way.
when you kill Johnny, in Wonderland, he's not coming back as Johnny. It's or you kill Alice, she's not coming back as Alice anymore. Right. And there's consequences, I think.
Absolutely. I'm a fan of the comics, the superhero stuff, and I just enjoy writing. I love telling stories. So I get a call and somebody says, "Hey, we want you to do a James Bond book." I'm going to do a James Bond book. If they, I've written pulp characters like the Green Hornet and the Phantom. I've written I got to write Shadowhawk for a while for Image. So
yeah, let's talk about that, because Shadowhawk, 1994, I think, or 1996, and then it sort of disappeared for a little bit, and then there was an entire resurrection, and the resurrection, I think, took place 15 years later as well.
Yes,
it was almost in real time. And I have a beat up old copy of Shadowhawk. I was all foiled out, and old school Image book. Got it for $1. Had no idea what it was about. It just looked dope, and it looks amazing. And these books are actually super cool because they were paying, tribute and homage to a bunch of retro covers and a bunch of like superhero type covers as well. So what was this like? Really writing, a few issues of Shadowhawk, knowing knowing that Image.
I got to do the resurrection of Shadowhawk, which the original series Jim Valentino did, and the idea for the character was he was a backbreaker. So basically, he was Batman. Well, he wasn't. He was sort of bad, but basically, if he got a bad guy, he would snap their spine to make sure they never did anything again. He couldn't trust the justice system.
So he was Punisher, just much crueler.
Yeah. But he also had AIDS. He was forced given AIDS by a bad guy as punishment. He was actually a DA who had put a guy away, and they hit him with they basically walked up to him, injected him with tainted blood, gave him AIDS. So they were killing him slowly. And that's when he decided to go out and wreak havoc on the streets. Well, the original Shadowhawk dies. He's gone for a long time. Valentino does some stuff with the character. There's a younger version for a while. And then Robert Kirkman gets involved with Image, and they're going to do Image United, which is all the big names are coming back. I mean, Jim Lee had left for DC already, and Rob Liefeld had gone off to do his own stuff. But Eric Larson, Mark Silvestri, Todd McFarlane, and Valentino were all going to do this book together. They were going to draw their own characters. And spinning out of it, Jim wanted to bring back the original Shadowhawk. Well, I didn't know any of this. I run into Jim at a convention. He comes by our table, and I had done a few books with Shadowline at that point. Strange Cases with Shadowline, Savage with Shadowline. And I said, so Jim, what are you doing with Shadowhawk? He said, well, I was thinking of bringing back the original. You got any ideas how I could do that? I went, yeah, absolutely. I do have one. He goes, okay, send it to me and we'll talk. I went, cool. Thinking, wait, is this really happening? He goes, who do you think we should get to draw it? And I'm sitting next to Tone Rodriguez because he and I used to travel everywhere together. I went, Tone. and Jim loved Tone.
So what was Tone's reaction to that? When you just point, and you're like, oh, he's sitting right next to me. Like,
Tone was in the middle of doing a commission for somebody. I leaned over and went, Tone, do you want to draw Shadowhawk? He goes, yeah. and that's pretty much how it happened. We did some other conversations afterwards, but I pitched the idea of how to bring him back, and we got it all set, and it was going to spin out of Image United, which, if you're a history of Image at all, you know.
I'm well aware of how that ended. I'm well aware. I don't want to ruin anybody's career, but I think it's safe to say Image United did not end well.
Okay, you can say Image United didn't end. They got two issues out. We were supposed to come out of issue 3, which is where the character was going to come back. They had sent the plot of how it was going to come back, and it never came out. So we started doing our issues. We were done, ready to go. We ended up doing the 5th issue of Shadowhawk, which was the final issue of the miniseries. Ended up telling the story that was supposed to be in Image United. But it was just a lot of fun to bring that character out, to do something a little different with him. I wanted to save the backbreaking till the end of the series. I wanted to kind of give him a group of side characters or supporting cast. And Jim was very generous with what he allowed me to do with the series. And to this day, if Jim, he's another one. If Jim called me up and said, hey, do you want to write? And that would be where the conversation would need to end, because I would be, yes. What do you need? Yeah, I love Jim. He's amazing. And I would jump at the chance to write more Shadowhawk in a heartbeat.
And obviously, I mean, Shadowhawk has a big history. It's a very progressive book. And obviously, it's also very image-driven, almost counterculture, almost a response to superheroes in a lot of ways. And the superheroes started going soft and then also becoming more dark again. And there's a whole conversation I have with Denny O'Neil about this because, well, Batman 66 didn't do superheroes any favors for 30 years. As much as Adam West and that show was important for licensing and merchandising, took 30 years to fix what it did.
It did, but at the same time, there was a good chance Batman was going to get canceled had 66 not come along. Had that show.
That's true.
Yeah, so yes, it did a lot of damage to the tone of comics, but it put Batman in a big enough spotlight that the books kept going. And we got a lot of amazing changes. The Riddler we have now, the Riddler only appeared twice before he was used in Batman in the first pilot episode, and it's only because someone decided to use the character again shortly before. He was gone out of comics for years, like 17 years. Appeared, went away, came back for one issue, and that's just happened to be the one the show producer saw and made that the first character. And if Frank Gorshin didn't do his amazing performance as the Riddler, we probably would never have seen the character again.
Probably Cesar Romero as well with the Joker. Without a doubt. Eartha Kitt as well.
Yeah.
Super important.
They went after all these huge named actors to play the villains and gave them credibility, So, yeah, it ruined the tone for a long time. But it also gave us a lot of what we have. The popularity of a lot of the characters came from that show.
The way I describe it, because I talk about this, because I'm big into comic book investing, is that there are two sides to comics. There's the underlying IP, and then there's the overlying IP. And the IP, I'm not saying we're breaking the IP, because you can't break the IP. You can't separate it, but you have to understand that movies, television are one side of the IP, and then the comic books are the other side of the IP. And then you can make the argument that the third side of the IP is the merchandising element of it. And it's very important when, you're investing in comic books and characters' first appearances, what you're investing, what you understand. And I'm planning to teach this entire class, and there's a whole discussion on that because it is super important. And I think that the show ultimately was good for the IP, but it hurt the underlying IP for 30 years and tonality, and then it took some fixing, and then Batman: The Dark Knight trilogy saved that.
Well, I think the problem is that at the time, DC thought they needed to do what the show was doing, but you look at Marvel, and Marvel Marvel Comics isn't doing necessarily what the movies are doing. The movies are super popular, but you've got Doctor Strange coming out in March, and they're about to kill Doctor Strange. WandaVision was huge, and it's going to be in Doctor Strange. They've just killed Wanda, or they're going to kill Wanda. They're killing Spider-Man in one of the books too, and they got a Spider-Man movie coming out. So it's obvious that the actual connection between what the comics are doing, what the film is doing, is not nearly as important, at least to the publisher, as they thought it was back in the late '60s.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I also think publishers are smart because they understand that all the ideas that are in comics wind up getting made into movies, and they want to experiment, I think, in the comics. Also Fallout 4. Nobody thought that book was going to be worth anything. I got a crazy story about that. I was at Midtown Comics on Free Comic Book Day. They're giving away that book for free. Mm-hmm. That book is a $1,600 to $1,900 book right now. They were giving it away for free, and they're like, "Do you want 4 more?" And this is how insane it is that Midtown Comics is giving away a first printing of Ultimate Falcor in the polybag. And now, fast forward 5 years later, that book is super, super pumped up. So go figure that one out. It's crazy world we live in.
Absolutely.
And so obviously there's one more book I do want to talk about, and that's The Freeze, because this is my alley. And I love the concept where basically, and stop me at any point, pretty much everybody's frozen except this one guy, Ray, and he can unfreeze people, and he starts doing it, and then it's this entire political, governmental restructuring of society where he's unfreezing people, and then they're saying, okay, what type of society do we want to have? Who should be unfrozen? Why should they be unfrozen? And when you start unfreezing a bunch of people, well, different people might have different ideologies. And definitely something similar came out, called Dr. Stone about 2 years ago. So it's just a very similar concept, but yours, I think, was first.
Dr. Stone. Is that Liam Sharp?
Dr. Stone's a manga.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm oddly not familiar with that. Really popular show. So people know it, and they see this in the comments, they'll know. But anyway, I like the entire concept of this because obviously we're dealing with what people do, and also ideologies and how society should be structured, and who deserves to be restored and not restored after this gigantic freeze occurred. And then if you leave people frozen, why are you leaving them frozen? And it raises a bunch of questions. Yeah. I'd actually been sitting on that idea for a long, long time. I had the original idea. I had been shopping it around. I pitched it to a couple different companies. I remember at one point I pitched it to Amit Zappa, Frank Zappa's kid, when he was set up over at Disney doing some comics. And to give a time frame on that, I remember leaving the meeting and seeing a poster for the pilot episode of Castle, which shows you how long ago that meeting was. And
you're already dating way past me because I don't remember Castle. I don't even know if I was alive during that.
Castle was a Nathan Fillion cop show, but so I had that idea for a long time. And I got a chance to talk with Matt Hawkins over at Top Cow.
I
And he
love
and I
Matt
were,
Hawkins. I love Matt Hawkins.
yeah, he and I were playing Dungeons and Dragons together. And he asked me one time after the games, like, why haven't you pitched anything? I said, what do you mean? He goes, anybody else who'd be in the game like this with me would be like sneaking me pitches occasionally. Why haven't you? I said, because I'm not here to do that. I'm here to. He says, just shut up and send me some pitches. So I like on a Friday, I sent him a couple pitches. On Sunday, I get an email from him going, we're going to do the freeze. I went, okay. He goes, and then on Monday, they sent me Phil Sevy's artwork. What do you think about this guy? I'm like, he's awesome. And it just kind of took off from there. But we wanted to get it all done. So it was about a year before it ever came out. We spent a year putting it together and getting the book finished. But the idea, I look at it as kind of a post-apocalyptic world without the apocalypse. It's just this event that happens and everybody is frozen. But it's the ramifications of that. And then what happens if only one person can start unfreezing people? Just the idea that he'd be able to unfreeze everybody is impossible because you can't physically go around and touch everybody on the planet. And also, would you? Should you unfreeze everybody? Those are the questions that start happening. You know, they unfreeze somebody that it turns into a medical situation. And then they got that question. So you have to pause and think about who you're unfreezing before it happens. And this is just an average, everyday guy who never wanted to be anything special. You know, there's a girl he liked at the office. He had the job he wanted. He had his grandma he was taking care of. Everything was good. And now he's the center of everything.
And then also what starts happening is that you start unfreezing certain people, and then maybe, you get a Cain will still kill Abel situation when you're trying to, maybe create a better world.
Yeah. You're trying to pick the right people. You're doing your research and looking up somebody online doesn't mean you're going to get to know who they really are, but you do your best. And but when you start doing that, you get these ideological questions like, well, why did this happen? Nobody knows in the story. Nobody knows why it happened, but humankind wants answers. That's how religion starts. That's how mythology starts, is we make up reasons. And if you're a religious person and suddenly the entire world gets frozen, you're going to think God did it. And if then one person has the ability to unfreeze them, God did that too. That's the Messiah. That's God's messenger right there. He's the chosen one to bring back, so you could see how that would start rolling. And I knew when I first came up with this idea, I would have to address that first. And that's kind of the first story arc, is who do you bring back? But as it's going on, I also want to address just human nature, how you can be bad under the surface and look good, as in, you could look like you're a good person. And I have an idea for a second arc that I'm currently got a pitch in with Matt right now. I'm hoping he's going to green light so we could do more. But yeah, it is an absolute blast of a series to write because you're thinking about things in a way you wouldn't normally think about things. You're looking at human nature. You're looking at how would you survive in this kind of world. And it's a lot of fun.
And then to even go further, because you said that you basically completed the entire story and all 4 issues were pretty much done. And then I think they were released monthly after that.
Yes.
But what is that like? Because that changes the way you write a comic, and it also changes the way a comic is distributed, because I don't know too much about mainstream, and I used to know a lot more, but I don't know how far a company like DC or Zenescope or Marvel gets ahead of things, or even Image gets ahead of things. But obviously, when you are all done with the series and you know that you can release it, it creates a lot of easement on the publisher, on distribution, even planning to go to a con. Because if you know that if you're going to be releasing in June and you have con season coming up, that maybe it's time to pick up a bunch of issue 1s. So that throughout the summer, I'm covered when people come to my table, so that by August or September, or even going into October, I have all 4 issues out. And then, so obviously there's a lot of stuff that is planning oriented with that. So what was that like? Because from a business position, it's difficult up front, but then it probably makes the back end a lot easier.
It does from a business standpoint. Once you know it's all done, and then you start scheduling it, you know it's going to come out on time. You know, okay, I've got this convention coming up. I got that. We can plan it out for these things. Oh, we're going to have a preview book at San Diego Con. Then we'll come out at the end of the year. That means we'll be bringing the trade out for the next San Diego Con. So people will remember the preview book. And even if they didn't pick up the individual issues, we're going to have the graphic novel on the table. Those kind of things is how you plan out. But the other thing is that normally when you're doing an ongoing book, a lot of times it's by the skin of your teeth. You're writing just a couple months ahead. You know, you solicit it like 2 months beforehand is when it gets into Diamond, and then it comes out, 2 months after that. So you're trying to keep far enough ahead. But then if an artist gets sick, you got all those problems. When you do something like this, Phil did the pencils, the inks, and the colors. And it was the first time he'd ever colored it. So he was a little slower than he would normally be. He's a very good, fast artist. But it slowed him down a little bit. So we really just thought, okay, let's take it off, keep it off the schedule. We'll get it done. We'll get, Troy Pateri came in and did all the lettering. When we got the books done, then it came time to put it out. And it just made a lot more sense to have it done in the can. And then if we needed to tweak anything, we always had that ability. But, that way we could plan out everything.
Also help with marketing as well, because now you know what the ending is. You got 4 issues. You know what the story is, that there's no surprises, and that you're committed also to getting it out, regardless of necessarily sales of the book. You're committed to getting it out, which means that, if issue 3 is going to kill it and issue 2 doesn't, well, you also know the trajectory to some degree of what the book's going to do.
Yeah. I mean, and when you put a book out, you put out issue 1 and you say next month issue 2 will be here. Readers want issue 2 to be there next month. They've accepted it. You've kind of made a deal with them. So say we got 2 issues in, and then Phil was outside playing with his kid, riding skateboards, fell and broke his drawing hand, and we don't have issue 3 on time. Then we have to either scramble for another artist or have to wait till Phil's ready to draw again. You get a delay in the book. You're breaking your verbal contract with the guys who bought issues 1 and 2 at that
or your coveted agreement with my hard-earned money and my comic shop, and you're destroying my soul. How dare you?
Yeah. And retailers put money up front to buy their comics. So when 2 months in advance they're saying, okay, we got this many people reading the freeze. I need that many issues of number 3.
I would even go even further because a lot of comic shops, so I order my comics online. I got to pre-order as a consumer, as a customer. I'm ordering 2-3 months ahead. And so it is crazy. Now I get a discount where, it's significantly cheaper, where when I'm ordering from Midtown Comics, it's $2.50 a book instead of $4 or $5 a book. So I'm getting a, 40 to 50% discount, but I'm 2 months ahead. And every once in a while I get a cancellation of a book, and it sucks. It's painful.
But you're not paying until, when you pre-order, but are you paying when you pre-order through Midtown?
I do. I pre-order and I'm paid, and I pay immediately. So I just made an order for $50 about 4 days ago, and I paid. That money's out of my bank account. And so I'm in a very interesting situation where I'm in a retail situation, and when I don't know how it works necessarily with a comic shop. If I had a pull, it's in a comic shop, but it's an online comic shop. Midtown's is a shop in New York City. They're well known,
right?
But it's the idea that I've prepaid. So I just ordered my stuff for October that I paid in July.
Yeah. See, most comic shops, you tell them what you want and you're committed to buying it, but you don't pay it until it actually comes in. So the retailer's on the hook if that book is late, but it's not out of your pocket until it actually shows up. But yeah, I didn't realize if you do it online, yeah, you would have to pay up front. So
And so I don't have a problem with it, but so I understand the whole comic retail side, and I think a lot of people understand that as well, especially if you're ordering online. And the only reason why I order online is it's not just comic shops around where I live; it's just cheaper, and it's more convenient, and it gets to my door, and also I have legitimately 2,700 titles I can choose from every single month.
mhm.
My comic shop, I can't do that.
Well, if you become a pull customer, then a lot of times they will start giving discounts, but you really have to be a regular. You can't just wander in and buy. But yeah, there's advantages to different things. But also being able to go into a comic shop and buying the book, you get the advantage of, hey, I want this book. There it is in my hand. I get to leave with it now. You're
Oh,
buying,
I go to comic shops, but also I'm a very glutton. And so I'm always looking for the exclusive. So when I go into a comic shop, I look for the exclusive. And also, like I buy directly from Zenescope because when they have an exclusive, I could buy from my comic shop or I could buy right from the horse's mouth.
right.
And I want to support them as a business as well as a bunch of shops that have exclusive variants. I want to support those shops. When a comic shop like Midtown has exclusive variants, that's what I want to buy in their store because I can't get everything else from them, or I buy back issues in stores.
Makes sense.
Because that's my favorite thing is to go through bins. It's my favorite activity in life. There's nothing more satisfying and calming down than playing with Legos or going through comic book bins. Those two things are the most tranquil things you could ever do in your life. I swear to God. Like if you're stressed out, Legos.
The Lego thing, I'm with you. I'm with you on the Legos.
And so that's it. But that is so off topic on the freeze. It is so off topic. Um, it's so bad. It's so bad. And then I would love to see a second arc of this because obviously I've read this. I love Matt Hawkins. I love Top Cow. I think Top Cow, definitely hits the military sci-fi vibe, which is definitely what I like in comics right now, more so than anything else. Is that things like Think Tank and obviously the Freeze and other things that they have done, like Samaritan and the Tilth, I think it is, or the Tithe. I forget what it's called.
The Tithe, yeah.
All that stuff is right up my alley.
Yeah.
And Witchblade is right up my alley as well. So obviously I like that stuff. But
If you like military sci-fi and you're a fan of Top Cow, there was a book I did with Matt and I co-wrote called Tales of Honor. They're based off of a series of novels by David Weber called Honor Harrington, and that is straight up military sci-fi, and it is a blast to do. And you should look for those trades; they're a lot of fun. There's 2 trades. I co-wrote the second one with Matt.
I'm gonna look into it because I need something to read and I need something that is easily accessible, which is called Amazon.com. So there you go. But even going further out of comics, you do write prose as well. You've written some Phantom, Green Hornet, Lucius Fogg, which is your creation.
Yes.
And so what is that like to write prose? Because it's very different what you do in a prose book the things you do in a comic and other things as well.
Prose is interesting because you're pretty much in control of everything. With Lucius Fogg, I also publish those. I put them out through my own publishing house, and I can sit down and I can write it at my own pace. I can go, all right, today I'm going to do this episode. But the first time I wrote Lucius Fogg, I had a hard time doing prose because I would rush to the ending. I couldn't force myself to stay on pace. And how I solved that was I actually wrote the first Lucius Fogg novel live on Twitter. I would get up and I would write each chapter in Twitter. Literally, this is back when it was still 144 characters, not the expanded. So I had a limited, so every sentence, everything, I was stuck by that. And I wrote the first book that way. And I would get constant feedback, but it forced me into now what is my normal writing pattern on how I can do prose. And I've done a lot since. But it's a very different writing style because you're not you don't have the artist to rely on. The biggest place I noticed it was I got it here. About a year or so back, Dynamite asked me to do an adaptation of The Boy. The Boys was real popular with the series. They asked me to take the first graphic novel and turn it into an actual prose novel. So we did that. And I found that taking some of Garth Ennis's writing and the artwork Derek Robertson have, and then trying to explain some of that, it became rather tricky. There were some scenes that were very difficult to explain or to put into words, but it was a lot of fun, and I got to expand on some stuff too, to give more depth. Starlight's character is very underused in the beginning because Garth didn't plan for her to be around very long. So I got to do more in-depth, spend more time at the Sevens location, her getting in. So that was a lot of fun, but I wouldn't have been able to do something like that, to be able to write a book like that, had it not been for doing the first Lucius Fogg book, for doing it live on Twitter, and forcing myself to find my mechanism for writing.
And even going further into The Boys, because obviously Garth Ennis is a national treasure in comics. Obviously, talking about Amazon. I mean, again, they totally should have sponsored this episode. But obviously The Boys is super popular, where The Boys was great when it came out in comics, and then Amazon has boosted probably the sales for it with the show. People love the show. People are cosplaying it, and I don't think prior to the show people were cosplaying it. And a lot of people who were not necessarily fans of the comics are now fans of the comics, and then you do the adaptation, which means that naturally fans of the comics, the show, new fans of the comics, and people see these cosplays are going to come into it. So what is that like for you, that you're adding to it and you're giving another, and you're feeding the beast? Because people who like The Boys want more of that content. And they also want more in between seasons and what they can get their hands on. So what is that like for you? Because you're feeding that beast in a lot of ways.
It was probably the most nerve-wracking project I've ever worked on, because I knew that when I was finished, it was going to go to Garth, that he was going to look it over to make sure it fit into his creation, that I didn't stray too far. I still told the story he wanted to tell. I mean, the fact that it's an adaptation, I'm not, I got to add some depth to some areas that he didn't get to play with originally, but overall it's still his story. So that was a little nerve-wracking. So I expected to get just a ton of notes back and in Garth's colorful language, and instead he pretty much just liked it. And, it went through pretty quickly. I was amazed.
So what is that like? Because obviously you're a veteran in the comic industry. Garth Ennis is a veteran in it. And when you're getting praise from another veteran, what is that like? And them, obviously critiquing it and also praising it to some degree, because every once in a while I get praise from another podcaster who's slightly bigger than me. And I go, oh, you did that interview really well. And then I'll praise somebody. And it's always nice when you have people who are professional praising you. And it also must be, it's super weird for me when like a big podcast is saying, oh man, that interview you did was great. It's super weird for me because I'm like, yeah, I thought it was okay. And so what is that like to be in that situation? Because it must be odd, but also really cool at the same time.
It is, because a lot of writers, and I can't speak for all of them, but I know a lot of writers I know, we're introverted. We suffer from like imposter syndrome. We assume that people only buy our books because they like the character and they deal with the fact that we wrote it, or we play ourselves down. A lot of self-deprecation. There are other writers who think that they're the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but like myself, I always just assume I'm this guy in the corner that's doing my job, and I get charity work or that type of thing, because it's that mindset. You work alone in a vacuum. I'm here in my office. I do the shows I do now, the podcasts I do now, but it's all from here. This is where my world, So I just assume that it's a joke or I'm just filling in. And when you actually get any praise, or, somebody like Garth Ennis just goes, yeah, that looks great, and you're expecting all these horrible notes and how you're going to have to start over, or my God, why did we hire this guy? You expect those, and it's anxiety. It's, you know, we all have these things.
I know completely, because every time I ask for an interview, I expect a no. I expect to be pushed down a flight of stairs. I expect to be kicked when I'm pushed and rolling down the flight of stairs. And I expect people to say, you suck. And not saying it the way Kurt Angle gets it sunk to him, but in a much meaner way. I completely expect the bare minimum and to be beaten up. And then when people praise me, I'm like, you think I'm good? Like, this is fascinating. When people say yes, I'm like, this is amazing, because it's just that attitude. And then I think it's, you know, I completely get it. I completely get it. And I think a lot of people who've never been in that situation don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, so, and when you're a writer, you spend so much time working alone. You know, you go to a convention, and that's where we actually get that human interaction. But at the same time, like I said, a lot of writers are introverts. So you go to a convention, then you're absolutely exhausted because you've spent so much time dealing with the public and dealing with people that you go back home and you hide in your cave again. But so to get any form of praise is a bit shocking. But when you come up with somebody like Garth Ennis, and, you know, and like I said, he was fine with it. He was good with it. He was, you know, it's like, how did that happen? You know, or you know, or the Freeze got so many really positive reviews that I started searching for the negative ones. Alan said, it's like, no, this can't be right.
No. You needed something just to bring your ego down a little bit, right?
Yeah. You can't. Don't make me think I'm actually a good writer. You can't let that happen. You know, or I joked it earlier in the thing about how I always got the call when Zenescope needed a script in a day. You know, because that's how you get your mindset that you're filling in, or you're, you know, the third call on the list when everybody else is turned down.
So you're the Elias Chazudis, in which he could build a cover in 6 hours, and you could build a script in a day.
Yes, and I've done one in 6 hours. There's a Zenescope book out there that I wrote in 6 hours. I won't say which one. I won't say which one, but it was that close on a deadline. I got a call the night before from, I think, Joe, and he said, we need it as soon as you can get it tomorrow. I went, okay, but I was in the middle of finishing something. So I finished it that night. The next morning I got up, wrote the script, and sent it out. I think it was to him by noon. So it was...
Oh, man, that's going to be a story that I'm going to make Joe tell me at some point. Ralph will tell me that story, or Joe will tell me that story, whether publicly on air or not. So expect that you might get a bunch of tweets on that end from me, Ralph, or somebody else. So having said that, obviously, I think that's all I want to talk about with comics with you. And I know I didn't get to like 90% of your career, which is really bad. It's really bad. But I do want to mention two things really quickly, because you are a photographer, and that you've had things published, I think, under Private Skin, I think, and Black and White. And so obviously my dad's a photographer, and as a hobby, he likes taking pictures of animals and goes on safaris, not to kill them, to take nice pictures of them. I want to make that crystal clear. I know what people are thinking. And they don't leave the van. They don't leave the van. The animals are... They understand it's a social contract. Mm-hmm. If you're in the van, you're not food. If you go out of the van, you're food. But anyway, so what is that like? Because obviously that is very artistic, and I know that you're better than stick figures, but taking photos is a very artistic thing, and it requires, you know, that level that, I guess, I don't know the right words here. I need a writer. I don't know if you know one.
Well, I mean, you basically have to have that artistic eye. I didn't mean to become a photographer. I didn't plan on it. When I started self-publishing or doing the Hardline Studios, we had a writer named Michelle who was using herself as the basis for her character, and we needed to send photos to an artist in Arizona to work from. And we had a guy who was going to be he called himself a photographer, but he could do landscapes beautifully. As soon as you put a person in the photo, suddenly he forgot how the camera worked. And he kept putting it off. And one day Michelle called me and said, I need these photos to send to Mike. Can you do them? I'm like, Well, I just got off work. I think I can borrow a camera. Come on over. We'll shoot in the backyard. And that literally was the first photos I ever took. And I just found that once I did that, some other girls I knew were like, hey, can you do some photos of me? And it just kind of took off from there. And I found myself coming up with ideas to do shots. And then suddenly I was doing model photography. And, you know, I had put some stuff online, and this company called Goliath over in Europe reached out and said, hey, we're doing this subdivision book called Mixapix, where we do collections. Do you want to submit stuff? I'm like, sure. So I sent them some of my black and white work, and they really liked it. And next thing I knew, I had a photo book out. And just, it's always been kind of a sideline for me, but it just kind of grew from there. And now it's probably been a few years since I had a chance to shoot. Circumstances change, whatnot, but I'm missing it. I'm itching to get back to do another photo shoot. So,
and obviously, I mean, I appreciate photography. I don't know how to use a camera. I don't want to touch an expensive camera. My dad obviously has showed me his expensive cameras. Like, you know, when you're dealing with like, you know, like $1,200, $1,400, those types of cameras. And like, he has like really expensive lenses that are worth more than the camera. And I don't want to touch any of it. I inherited my father's watch problem, where he has a watch fetish, and I have a watch fetish now. And that's as far as we're going to go with it. I'm not going to inherit my father's camera.
Before you get it, I'm going to show you a watch that has special lineage. This watch doesn't look like anything special, does it?
No, it does not.
Okay.
I'm about to be schooled, everybody.
This watch I was wearing when I cameoed on an episode of Dexter. And you can see this as I'm a dead body on an episode of Dexter, and that is the watch I'm wearing, and it's clearly in view. So that is a very special watch. That is a television-worn watch from an episode of Dexter.
And Dexter is coming back.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So
I haven't seen enough of Dexter that I've seen the first season, and that's as far as I got, just because of time. I mean, I enjoyed it, and I enjoy the concept of it. I just have not had time to watch it. And I'm on an anime binge right now, and at some point I will wear a Dragon Ball Z G-Shock if I ever get into television. That's a dead body. It's a nice, flashy watch.
yeah.
But I'm smart enough that I'm going to contact G-Shock first, and I'm going to make sure they send me another anime watch for me promoting their watch. This way I can monetize it. But anyway, I digress right there. And then the other thing I want to talk about, and this is something that I enjoy, and I enjoy metal, is that you're in a newly formed metal band, Murder Most Foul.
Yeah. Well, I was.
Yeah.
This was.
Let's put it this way. We could table it. You play the bass. We
the bass.
go there.
And I got pulled into this band. I had a guitar instructor that I hired. I was taking lessons from this guy, and we became friends. And just for a long time, we were playing. I even used him as the bassist for the character in the Grimm Fairy Tales book, the Dorian Gray book. He's the guitar instructor in Dorian Gray episode. And he was sitting there one day. He's like, you know, I've got this band, but I don't have a bass player. Why don't you play bass for us? And I'm like, dude, I'm like 10 years older than everybody in the band, if not more. But okay. So there was we did a lot of practice, a lot of garage stuff. It never really took off, but I was part of this for a while, and it was a lot of fun. So I still do play bass when I get a chance, but yeah, Murder Most Foul never really got to the heights we had hoped for.
And the reason why I bring it up is that this is just another creative outlet that you are involved in, and even just the fact that you're doing music. Obviously, I want to do music, and I just haven't gotten around to it. At some point, hopefully I will. It's a sitting activity. I used to do martial arts, and well, my body doesn't work the way it should. So obviously, playing guitar or bass is a sitting activity. So it's very, very cool in that regard. And so obviously that's why I bring it up, is it's very cool with creativeness and all that, and probably helps with writing.
Well, in a way, it's all connected. Photography, music, writing, even, I mean, art, painting, it's all storytelling. Every time you create something, you're telling a story. Whether you're using a guitar to do it, or you're using a paintbrush or a camera, or, you know, a Word document, you're writing a script, you're telling a story. So to me, creativity is storytelling. And we've been telling stories since as long as there's been humans. We've been telling stories, cave paintings, telling stories around a campfire, all of that. That is the nature of mankind, is to be storytellers, you know? And I think that, you know, any formula, any way you have to tell the stories, you know, take it. That's the outlet. You talked about building Legos. In a way, you're being creative there. You know, if you're just following the one on the box, well, but when you start making your own designs, you start building your own setups, or you go out and you go, I'd like to make my own Millennium Falcon, and you start planning it out on your own. Now you're telling a story.
Oh, so, you should see what I do and how I digitally design my own sets. I'm a very creative person, and I have enough friends who work. My former boss is a designer at Lego in Denmark.
You need to get a guy on here named Craig Hamilton. Craig Hamilton's a comic artist. He's worked on a bunch of stuff for DC, but he is a Lego enthusiast like you wouldn't believe. He has a Lego room he was telling me about, and you know, he plans out his builds. He has them all in like toolboxes or drawers, so that he's got them separated by color, so he knows where to go to get which pieces. I remember he basically put a bounty out for pink Lego pieces he needed.
Oh my God! Don't start me on that. Don't. They're the most annoying pieces to find when you need them.
Yeah. So you need to get Craig Hamilton as a guest on here.
My specialty is Lego mosaic work. So okay. I build Lego mosaics using 1x1s. And so I'm building massive things that are just crazy. And I'm building a Naruto Sexy Jutsu virtually, digitally. And it uses so many pink pieces. It is sick. Like, the thing is going to be so expensive. It's going to be like, legitimately, if I was to build it in person, it's going to be like 10 grand to build it, which is insane.
Yeah.
But enough about Legos, because I'm going to get myself in trouble. Everybody else is going to get in trouble. My old boss is probably going to shoot me when he hears this. And so it's going to be bad. So obviously, I haven't touched 1/10 of your career. And it's really bad because I'm totally unprofessional in that regard. There's just so much to talk about. But I don't want to keep you here all night. But I do want to give you an opportunity to self-promote. I know you got a bunch of stuff's going on. I know I didn't touch half the stuff. At some point, my mom's going to come back in like 10 minutes, and she's going to want to cook dinner, and I'm going to get yelled at and kicked off one way or the other. But where can people find you? Where can people follow you on social media, Facebook, right, Instagram? Also, what projects do you have coming up? And when you come back into Zenescope, because I want more of your writing.
I've spoken to Dave Franchini lately, and he's basically waiting to. He's got me in mind. He's going to put me on something soon, so I'm just waiting for to get the call. What I'm doing a lot.
Come on a virtual con. You got to get on a virtual con as well.
Yeah, yeah, that would be fun. Right now, what I'm doing a lot of is I started doing what you're doing. I do a podcast every Sunday night on my YouTube channel called Pop Go the Writers, which is myself, a writer named Paul Story, and we bring a guest on. We've had Jamal Igle, we've had Jim Beard, and a bunch of other people, and we talk about the latest pop culture stuff. We do a lot with the the Disney Plus shows like Loki, stuff like that. So I do that on Sunday nights. During the week, I do a show called the Dan Wickline Show, which airs on the Comic Book Shopping Experience. I do that Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So you can look for it on there. And that I do everything from having guests on, interviewing them like you do. Tomorrow night, I'm actually interviewing image colorist Brian Haberlin. And then I've got a new project I'm working on that Kindle Vella is this new thing where you get these chapter stories They're pros, but they come out one chapter at a time. They've just launched. They're still in beta, but I'm going to do a brand new book there, a new series called, well, the book's going to be called The Ember Crest Protocol, and it's a 1970s spy thriller where the Cold War is still going on, but what the Cold War is about is not nuclear proliferation, but the control of magic. So think of James Bond with as a spellcaster, and you've got
So we got James Bond, Harry Potter, and Cold War.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to have that 1970s James Bond pastiche going on. It's going to have that feel, but again, magic, and there's going to be some Lovecraftian stuff thrown in there. It's going to be just a wild story, and I'm going to release it a chapter at a time. The first three chapters on this thing are going to be free, but I'm hoping to have it done and up by the end of the week.
And so you got a lot of stuff going on, and obviously you're heavily involved in comics, and I don't know, I'm sure you still do some con stuff out, west. And obviously I'm assuming, and I'm going to take a leap of faith here, that 2021 is sort of a down year for you.
Yeah. I think the first con I'm set up for is going to be at the end of this year. I'm going to get out to Comic-Con Revolution in Riverside, California, and that'll be the start of me getting back out to shows. Yeah.
But the reason why I say that is that obviously, I have a feeling 2022 is going to be more of a normal schedule for everybody, including myself. And I'm coming back in June in 2022 just because I'm in, the East Coast and it's cold all the way up to June for the most part. I live in Connecticut, and no offense, but I'm not going to a con when it's snowing out.
I understand.
So,
but then I've been to the Phoenix Con in the middle of July in 610 degree weather. That's just as insane. I love the Phoenix Con, but damn, it gets hot out there.
Yeah, I agree. So on that note, and I've been saying this to everybody, you have to support comic creators, writers, people are doing projects you love. You have to support them, and what that means is that you have to check out their websites, check out their books, buy their books, actually read their books, follow them on social media. If they have a project that's coming out, you got to back that project. You got to go say hello to them at a con. Say hello to somebody at a con. Buy something that they're selling. Especially
we don't bite unless requested.
That is true. That is true. Mm-hmm. And so obviously, though, that's something that you have to do, and you have to support what you love, because that is the way this gets made more and more and more and more and more. And so I'm encouraging everybody to do that. Also, this show, what I want everybody to do is I just want everybody to share it. That's what I am asking everybody to do. I have, a link for a donation, not required by anybody. If you feel so inclined to, feel free to. But I don't need it. What I really want is I want shares, because I want more people to see this. And that's what I really want. That's my entire intention. So it's super important to do that as well. And on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
All right. You guys can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, at Dan Wickline. My name is everywhere. When he talks about supporting your creators out there, if you love someone's work, support them. Another way to do that for some of the older creators, the guys that created all these characters that we're loving, is a group called the Hero Initiative, who help out and aid comic creators who are down to their luck, whether it's an older creator who maybe created the characters showing up on the Disney Plus series, or it's a younger creator who's dealing with medical issues. Hero Initiative is an amazing group. I've done as much work as possible as I can with them, and will continue to do so. They do auctions online. You can buy original art. You can buy a bunch of stuff. They do sketch covers, amazing ways you can follow these guys. So reach out to the Hero Initiative, look and see what you can buy from them, pick up from them. It's a great charity to support the creators out there, and definitely support your retailers. Get out to your retail stores. They need you to come in. They need you to buy things. You love comics. It's a match made in heaven right there. So,
yeah, and I think I couldn't have said that any better myself. So I believe that is a wrap right there.
Well, thank you for having me, Andrew. It's been a lot of fun. You did good.